Welcome back to the Lords of Lore Podcast Network. You're listening to our flagship show, the Lords of Lore Podcast. I am Matt.
I'm Luca.
And I'm Will.
And this is the podcast for all things fantasy and sci-fi nerddom and fantasy sci-fi nerddom. That's right. Today we are talking about Star Wars, but more specifically, the Force. And, what sort of magic system is the Force? Is it a soft, hard? Does it follow its own rules? We don't know, but we're excited to break it all down for you. But before we do that, we'll be getting into our regular scheduled programming here. So Luca's Litany of Literature, wherein Luca has the podcast within the podcast, tells us a little bit about what's going on in his fantasy world. Then I will bring a monster to the table, or a set of monsters to the table in Matt's Monster Musings, where I bring a monster to the table. Yeah. And did you know I also bring a monster to the table? Then we will start off our main topic with Will's Wondrous Wisdom, wherein Will brings some wondrous wisdom and the real world origins of, the main topic. And then we'll finally get into it, as it were. So without any further ado, with further ado, if you haven't already, last week we released our first episode of Lords of Lore Adventures, where the three of us went on a journey ran by the great Cam Chapman. And it was a lot of fun, and we'll be picking that up, not in our regular Tuesday spot, but you can catch the subsequent episodes in the Friday spot, where where Unabashed and Ruminations isn't that slot. So expect something most Fridays from us, I guess. But I am not committing to that, so don't hold me accountable. Without any further ado, let's get into Luca's Litany of Literature. What's going on?
I started reading Malazan again. Listening to Malazan again. It's phenomenal, as usual. Not a lot, though, because I was on a trip this past week and stuff, so I was not reading very much. But I actually started a new book today, because I have no self-control. And it was recommended to me by somebody I work with. It is called Ubik. It is a well-known sci-fi book, apparently. It was written in the 60s, I believe. And it takes place in a futuristic 1992, where people have learned psychic abilities, and they have managed to find a way to preserve the dead in like a half-life state, where you can essentially visit your deceased loved ones well beyond the time that they're deceased, which is a super interesting concept. I've only finished the first 2 chapters, but it's a pretty short book. Very interested in the concept. I thought it was funny that I started the sci-fi book the day we're doing our first sci-fi theme. Yeah. So that's cool. And I've been reading.
Oh, it's by Philip K. Dick.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Who is also famously responsible for not Blade Runner, technically, but Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which spawned Blade Runner and so forth.
Correct. And I've been reading the great Brando Sando, Oathbringer.
Ooh.
Very good.
How do you read more than one book at a time? That's incredible.
I'm only technically reading one. The other 2 are audiobooks, so that makes it easier.
Okay. Oh, sure, yeah.
But since we're talking about the Force as a magic system, I thought I'd bring up the hard versus soft conversation again. Just as a quick little, I love hard magic systems. And as I'm reading Oathbringer, it is maybe the hardest system I've ever come across. How do you guys feel about hard versus soft?
Go ahead, Will.
I think we might have gotten into this in some of our earlier episodes, but I think what I said then is what I'll say now. Is it just depends on how it's written.
As a general rule, though,
it's a cop out.
If you heard it, like, I have a soft versus hard, like not knowing anything about the writing style, or like, it's like, what would you choose to read?
I think hard is cooler in that, like, there's a lot of structure to it, and like I could see, like, I think an example would be like Full Metal Alchemist, and like I love that, how like magic works in that, but I just feel like soft is just easier for fantasy, just because there's a lot more avenues to move around. So I don't know, it was a cop-out answer, but I think when we talked about it, that's when I learned about how pretty much every magic system I knew is technically soft. So,
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. So I think, okay, so for listeners who weren't privy to our previous conversation because we didn't release it, I think through that episode, we all sort of went on a journey of soft doesn't innately mean bad and hard doesn't mean good at all. There are some bad hard magic systems. But I think, like Will said, a lot of the things I thought were hard systems were technically soft systems. And I don't think that's an indictment. I think soft magic systems can be just as well done. Again, as we always say, it depends on how it's written. I think I think consuming something is easier if it's a soft system because you don't really need to know. And if something breaks the rules that are not set forward, but doesn't seem in line with other things you've seen before, it's not world breaking because you're like, I guess they used it in a different way. But I feel like with a hard system, it's sort of like another thing you're also aware of. And so I think the authors need to be, or the creators need to be that much more careful to not. But I mean, that's part of the fun, I guess, or the enjoyment. So I don't know. I don't know if I have a preference. I think it'll always come down to how cool it is, which is not objective at all. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like if you enjoy the mechanics of the writing and the system, then it's like, doesn't matter, soft, hard.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've always leaned to hard systems just because I find them super interesting, even though they're rare. But yeah, Brandon Sanderson, like anybody that loves hard magic systems, his are exclusively hard systems, essentially.
Yeah.
Where you always know what's going on. And we'll get into what the force is in a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great tease.
Yeah.
Because we'll definitely have to talk about
some opinions.
Okay.
On the forces.
Yeah. Okay. We got it. I have a question though. Sticking with this, you said in Ubik that there's a way to visit your deceased relatives in this half thing. So, one, my question to you both: is that something that would appeal to you if it was something that was doable?
Oh, that's so heavy.
I know. I was like, I want to say yes, but I don't know.
Right.
What if like the relative you're trying to talk to just like didn't like you, and then they just like absolutely?
Yeah. How much autonomy do they have? Does it give information
none.
there? None.
From what I've seen, none. It's essentially like their living relatives bring the body to the place that preserves it, and then they use a bunch of sci-fi terms to like connect into their cerebral impulses or whatever, and it's like then you could talk to them through that.
Oh,
and there's like limits to how long they can be preserved and how many times you can visit them, and you have to pay for it. Obviously, it's not like a free service,
right? There's a similar thing in Altered Carbon. Yeah. I don't know if you guys have seen the show, but there's a Netflix adaptation. I think it was a novel before.
It was, yeah. Very good. Highly recommend.
There's a scene in the Netflix show where they're having a dinner, and so basically your soul and your mind is on this disc type thing. I think they're called stacks. And you can put a stack into any sleeve or body, and you would come alive in that person's body. So you can clone yourself and have duplicates. But if your stack gets destroyed, then you die. I think those are the loose rules of the thing. Anyways, and I think you can make duplicate stacks of yourself, but I think you can,
but it's illegal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's also like highly damaging to the person.
Yeah, you lose a part of yourself every time but anyway, so this dinner, it's like this family and they bring their grandmother back, but it's in like this thug's body. So it's like this big like gangster, and it's the grandma, she's like speaking Spanish, but there's an interesting part at the end where she's like, don't bring me back anymore, like because they do this like once a year, because again I think it's an expensive thing to like rent the sleeve or whatever the case is. And yeah, I don't know, just like I think like that bugs me less than the one you're talking about from Ubik, because it's like at least she can tell them like, hey, stop bringing my stack back, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I don't know much about the concept yet, just because I haven't finished the book.
Right. Yeah.
But from what I can see now, it's like the person who is deceased has zero autonomy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Altered Carbon is like dystopian peak capitalism.
Yeah.
Very scary. That was
you could get viruses in your head.
Yeah, and just like basically just like very high top 0.1% can basically afford to do this stuff. Because I think in the first like 5 minutes of the first episode, it's like someone's trying to like someone's sleeve got like murdered.
Yeah, so they're trying to figure out who.
Yeah. Well, no, just like at the start when it's just like the family and they're like, can we get a new one? Because it's like victim reparations. Then it's like a completely like it's like a little girl's mind, like a 5-year-old is like.
Yeah, I think she dies in a car crash.
And she gets like put into like a 60-year-old woman's sleeve, and like that's basically all that the family can afford. So it's like incredibly messed up.
Yeah, it's fucked. Yeah, it's a good show though.
Yeah,
I mean, sci-fi can really bring out those truly dark and terrible concepts of humanity and what we value as humans.
Yeah, and also it's kind of nice because you could just have a different cast playing every time. That's
true. Yeah,
because I think Anthony Mackie killed it, and same with the first dude. I can't remember his name though.
Is he in the second season, Anthony Mackie?
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't seen the second season yet.
Yeah, there's like way more world building to it.
Okay.
It's almost like you could watch like either or without having to watch it in succession.
Yeah.
But
cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Dark Universe. Good book.
Nice. Okay, let's move over. Oh, sorry. Does that wrap the entry in the litany?
It does wrap the entry. Thank you.
Nice. So we'll move over to Matt's Monster Music. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I didn't have very much time to prepare a monster. And so what I usually do when that's the case is I'll go to my wall of miniatures and I will just look through the ones I've painted. And I want to talk about that one today. And that's the case today. So I want to talk about Clockwork monsters, which is an even bigger cop-out than how well it's written, because they're normal monsters, but they're made out of machine parts, which I think, sort of Star Wars-esque. So this would be like the droid equivalent of a dragon. You can see, obviously, it's gold. It's got leathery, flappy wings and a tail, and it's all steampunky goodness. Now, the reason I like Clockwork monsters is because Clockwork monsters have to come from somewhere. And just that alone is interesting enough to warrant playing them in your games, whether it's someone who's making these fucked up things or they're reproducing in some way, or where did they come from initially? Just the same way you could do with any sort of creatures in your game. But when it's like man-made machinery, I think it's just that much more interesting. Part of running a D&D campaign, in most cases, I would say, is not getting a fulfilling ending. You run into scheduling errors, people move away, stuff like that. So it's very rare that you get to finish a campaign. And I haven't. So Luca, this is spoilers for the campaign we never got to finish. But in that campaign, there was a bunch of threads that were pointing towards this gnomish engineer who had been kidnapped by this extremist group out in the East. And they are forcing him to manufacture clockwork enemies, I guess the best way I could describe it. So you fought against these clockwork giants that had like large weapons, and those were formidable. But the sort of the eventual going point of the campaign was that there would be a whole army of these clockwork soldiers, similar to the droid army from the prequel movies. And that was sort of where it was heading. But among those creations was this clockwork dragon, which was like his magnum opus type of thing. And so that's why I had painted this one. And also just like a fucking sweet mini to paint. It's super fun. So thoughts on Clockwork Mechanica?
The way you described it is so cool. I usually don't like them, especially when it's like creatures, like biological animals made into clockwork things, because it's usually like in a sci-fi setting, then all of a sudden you have the scientist. And again, like going back to our conversation about what are those tinkerers. What are they called from D&D?
Oh, artificers.
Artificers, yeah.
Yeah.
Same type of instinctual dislike in a fantasy setting, you know?
Yeah. I would you say that you're like pretty precious about the line between sci-fi and fantasy?
Yes, I am, unnecessarily so, because I love them both.
Yeah.
I just don't like when they crisscross for some reason.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
But there is some that are so well done that I do enjoy, like Mark Lawrence's writing, like the 2 trilogies that happen on Earth in like a post-apocalyptic Earth.
Right.
I think that's super, super interesting. But there's just something about when it's like fantasy sci-fi crossing in that way, where it's like not even sci-fi, just like normal mechanical engineering or something that just like crossing into a fantasy world that is as strong as magical things. It's like,
yeah,
you're ruining my power level, like immersion stuff.
Yeah, that's fair. I like to look at examples sort of like I don't know if you guys have played Horizon Zero Dawn. I think I've talked about it when we did our worst events to live through.
Yep.
But yeah, like all those animals in that game are this, but it is more interesting because they are reproducing, or at least there's places in the world that are pumping these things out. And whether they're like the hostile ones or the giant dinosaur ones, I think they're like equally as interesting, that like this is taking place outside of human hands, but they're not like totally sentient. They still act like animals type of thing. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Will?
When you say like automatons, like that's kind of like what I'm thinking is. I think like one of the cool ways to look at like Greek mythology is that there's a lot in various stuff like Jason and the Argonauts, and I think maybe even the Odyssey as well, and like Hercules and stuff like that. There's been a lot of interpretations with automatons being in it. Yeah, and like super early ones as well, like just like these like weird machines and stuff, because I think like back in the time when those stories would have been made, like you would have seen like weird contraptions that were kind of like reminiscent of like the, what are those things where it's like those machines you call like when you like poke a ball and it goes down a track, then it hits a bunch of dominoes.
Rube Goldberg machine.
Yeah, kind of like that. So like you'd see like that kind of style of like engineering, and it's like often been interpreted as being like automatons and stuff like that. I think a good one in like video games is like the God of War series, like the first 3 or 4, I guess. You see a lot of that. Like the labyrinth is like reimagined as like this like giant like cube puzzle. So like Daedalus's workshop, like the guy who like invented the labyrinth, is actually just like this giant intricate Rubik's cube kind of thing. And like I just I think that's like kind of cool to see. It's almost like ancient history versions of like steampunk.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, like as far as like spookiness, I guess it just like depends on the creature that it's made into. I mean, like a giant dragon would probably be pretty terrifying, but like I don't know.
I always when we're talking about steampunk things, I think even in our episode of Artificers I brought this show up, but Love, Death and Robots, obviously 10 out of 10, recommend the entire series, but specifically the episode called Good Hunting. I want to say it's episode 7 of the first season, but I could be wrong. Anyways, beautiful art style, and the story's heartbreaking and phenomenal, but there is an aspect where it's sort of, I don't know, like, because I know you like this episode, right, Luca?
Yes.
But in the episode, it's this fantastical creature, this spirit or yokai or hooligan, I think it's called in that interpretation. Losing their powers from being too close to humans and then regaining those powers via steampunk technology and mechanical sort of innovation. How do you feel about that transition from a fantastical creature to a normal one back into a fantastical one, even though it's not magic anymore?
I mean, I like that. I thought it was a cool episode, especially since it's like, that's like one mythical creature in our normal world, and our normal world with this like normal quote unquote development, like technologically. So I like that. That's not for me, it's the opposite. It's like when it's a fantasy setting world and everything, and then you bring the like technology into it. That's what I don't really like. But when it's like a fantastical element in our normal world that sort of changes and transitions, that's fine. That's enjoyable.
I see. Okay, so I don't even remember what the last monster music. I think it was Gelatinous Cube, and obviously, not much of a fight between. Well, maybe the Gelatinous Cube would win because it could break it down. Yeah. But anyways, what I want to talk about, maybe we'll have another episode where we talk about Draco Liches, but like a skeletal dragon versus this, like a clockwork dragon. What would you guys rather face off against?
Skeletal.
And why is that?
Well, I'm assuming a couple things. First of all, a skeletal dragon, I'm assuming it doesn't use magic. I mean, I know in D&D it does. But like just a pure skeleton chasing you, no matter how big it is less terrifying than a giant robot that can presumably have like other abilities.
Fair enough.
And a skeletal dragon can't fly.
Yeah, it depends on the lore.
It depends on a lot, but like pure, if we're talking about like a skeleton versus a mechanical dragon, like give me the skeleton every time.
Yeah. More like the one you fight in Labyrinthian. Is that what it's called?
In Skyrim, like the ancient dragons.
Yeah. I think the mechanical one would just be terrifying because like if it's a skeleton, you can just smash into a pile of bones. But
yeah,
if it's like a mechanical one, you'd be like pretty hard pressed to like take it down via up close and personal.
See, I feel the other way.
Really?
I think like, yeah, with the mechanical one, there could be weaknesses. You could fuck up the gear that controls its wing, and now it can't fly. Whereas like the Dracolich, depending on the lore, like it just flies because it's magic, and it's got breath weapons because it's magic, and it's alive because it's just so pissed that it's dead. It's like, nah, I'm coming back. Whereas like the mechanical one's just like, it doesn't really have a soul. I don't know. I guess it depends who made it or how it's made, but like, I don't know. It just feels like I would rather fight a machine than like something so pissed that it died that it came back. Like that's going to be something hard to kill.
That is a good point. I was just thinking because usually when you take a biological creature and turn it into a skeletal form, it's usually a little bit weaker physically.
That's fair.
Whereas the mechanical version is always stronger physically.
That's a good point.
Now, when you throw magic into it, then it's like, all right, well, the skeletal dragon could have all of the abilities of a normal dragon, just turn to 11 because it's magic.
Yeah.
I was picturing like a tank, just like a flying tank or something.
Yeah.
That's why I was kind of like, nah, I'll take the skeleton.
Yeah. I think it's a lose-lose, but you guys raised some good points. I think it all just depends how it's written, I guess. But yeah, that'll do it for Matt's Monster Musings. So now let's head into the main topic, the Force. Will, you have some wondrous wisdom for us?
Sort of. So I guess like when I typed in, when I did my research, aka I just typed in, I guess like Force as magic. One of the things that got brought up like instantly on the first result was telekinesis. So I was kind of intrigued because when I think of telekinesis, I think of the movie by the Illusionist.
Okay, I've never seen it.
Yeah, with Edward Norton. I think it's like
got a fantastic DVD cover though. The thing he's holding is like
the orb,
reflective. Yeah. I remember looking at it.
That's like exactly the first thing, which is also, just as a side note, is based off a short story that's 20 pages long called Eisenheim the Illusionist. You can actually find it for free, like just off Google, like first result. I flipped through it. It's a very old story, so be warned about some of the language in it. Just as a heads up. Uh, but like it got me thinking of like, like that craze back in the day, like that time period of like the late 1800s of like, I guess like showmanship in theater and stuff like that, like Phantom of the Opera and all that kind of stuff. And like the early magicians, like these entertainers that were, like massive celebrities back in the day. I guess. I mean, like a lot of it was just like showmanship and like stage magic. Because, like making a chair float would be like just like wires and stuff. But to everyone in the audience, it was just like absolutely mind blowing. Which is like funny because like a century before, they probably would have been like hit with like accusations of witchcraft.
Right.
But then again, I think most of the magicians were men, so that also probably is a factor in.
Unfortunately, likely, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like it made me think of like, I guess just like how like that's still kind of like popular in the modern world with like David Blaine, and I think is like kind of like the big one in the last few decades. But there's a lot of like, just like those like tropes of like spoon bending and levitation and stuff like that. Like when I think of the forces, like I really think of telekinesis as just kind of like the main thing, just like controlling this force that can do like, push pull objects. But I guess that's kind of like the movie force examples that we see like in the films, as opposed to like expanded universe where there's different variations like force,
Right.
lightning, and mind control and all that stuff. But
Right.
I think that's like the closest I could find to like real world adaptations. And it's probably like the techniques that were used in the making of the films are like probably similar to the ones like back in the day, like 100 years ago. So a lot of steel wires and stuff like that.
Yeah, fishing line and stuff.
I think that's just kind of like been a constant throughout history as well, like going back to like performers and entertainers from like ancient Egypt and stuff like that, and just general circus magic, showmanship. Yeah. What do you all think?
Yeah,
I guess like, what do you think of force as compared to like something in history?
Good question. I think, okay, so it's funny you mentioned like performers. There's a book, a Star Wars book I have here, the Legends of Luke Skywalker, where it's basically stories about Luke after episode 6. So after the Empire has been defeated, he's going about learning what the Jedi are, and then eventually, as we know, forming a new Jedi temple. But in between, and the stories, it starts like on a ship, and people are, they're recounting stories that they've heard, like legends of Luke Skywalker. And one of those is that it was all a hoax. Obi Kenobi, or Old Kenobi, I think they call him in this short story. They were just like these circus acts that went around, and there's just smoke and mirrors, levitating things, telling tall tales about the Empire, which never existed, stuff like that. I think it's more interesting as like a societal way to look at how stories are passed on. But I think it's interesting that like to some people's perspectives, these things were really happening. Like when you mentioned like, they were using fishing line and steel wire and stuff. Like there's some people in the audience that like saw that and went home and told people like this guy was lifting chairs. Yeah. And like there might have been people who like went their whole lives believing that. And then I've actually been watching Stranger Things recently. And I haven't seen it before. And there's like that whole thing with like the MK Ultra and like experimentation, and that led to people having telekinetic powers, all this sort of high conspiracy things. But it got me thinking, like, what if, like, I'm sure if there was things like that, especially with the U.S. government, that happened, we probably wouldn't know about them. And like I said, like people tell stories like that, and you go, yeah, all right, man, it's probably just fishing line. And be like, no, I saw it with my own eyes. Like, yeah, okay, buddy. And like, what if what if that's right?
I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't even think of MK Ultra, like all these like drug testing and stuff like that from sketchiness, covert stuff back in the day.
Yeah.
I also like that, because expanded universe is so huge, right? Until it got swept under the rug. But I never thought of like people just being like hearing the story of Luke Skywalker, like some like place in the Outer Rim where they just like, okay, yeah, whatever, and they just go back to like their daily lives.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, sounds like a cool movie, haha, and then continues.
Yeah.
Kind of like, what if Star Wars did happen, and that's our interpretation.
Yeah, no, for sure.
No, that's a cool way of looking at it. I never thought about that. But like definitely, like I'm sure like in the universe of Star Wars, like you might hear it and just like not care, as we might hear of like some circus performer like that David Blaine dude who's just levitating stuff. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and there are examples in Star Wars where they're mostly after the Jedi Purge, where people who were around when that was a thing are like, when the Jedi were here, things were different, type of thing. And the person's like, what the fuck is that? Like, that doesn't really exist. I like there being like people who are like, yeah, okay, Jedi. Anyways, let's get into it. Okay, so today we are tackling the topic of the Force as a magic system. So I think, Luca, this was your suggestion. So why don't you start us off with your thoughts and why you thought to tackle this topic?
I love talking about magic systems. Star Wars is one of the largest IPs of our lives. And the
of all time.
Yeah, and the Force is a cool magic system. To begin, I would define it as more on the soft side. Even though you do know what you can do with the Force, you know nothing about how you get it, how you use it, how it works, nothing, unless midichlorians are the legit way we're going. And is that canon? Like, has that ever been
100% canon? Yeah.
That's extremely disappointing.
Especially with the Disney reboot.
I
just because
I disagree. I'm just going to throw this out there. We'll get into it later, but I don't disagree that you're disappointed. But
no, I understand. Yeah. Like, I don't hate that as like the reason they're being like these microscopic beings that like the concentration of them in your body gives you access to this power. That's okay. I don't like the fact that it was implied that they are the fathers of Anakin Skywalker, which literally his mom said there was no father. So it's like, okay, so these microscopic creatures created Anakin and somehow he's not the god of this world. Okay. So I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm also not a huge, I love the Force as a concept. I'm not a huge fan of its use in the films. I have a feeling it would be much better used in the books, which I have not read any of.
You can I lend you all of mine.
But like, for example, there's the scene in episode 1, the only scene we ever see like Force speed, and then it's just like never ever used again in any context.
And like it's like incredibly useful too.
Yeah, like such a useful ability.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No,
we do see it in like Clone Wars, but I don't know.
I mean, you could. I know, like, just as like a side jump, like I believe there's like one lightsaber style, like I think the one that Yoda uses, where you use the Force to like enhance your ability. So maybe that is connected to the Force speed. But yeah, I remember like the first time I saw that, I was just like, what just happened?
Yeah, I didn't notice the Force speed until
not into my adult life.
I did not even notice it. Or
I thought my VHS was skipping. Like literally.
So I don't like a lot of the decisions creatively in Star Wars. Honestly, that goes through like 1 through 9, like especially 7, 8, 9.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a different topic. Like
I
we will
disagree entirely about 7,
I
8, 9. I think
I know.
there's weird things and there's definitely inconsistencies. And I think because Star Wars is the middle came first, the beginning came second,
Mhm.
the sequel came third.
Yeah.
Like obviously that's weird, and we all know that.
Mhm.
I mean, depending on your interpretation, what you like, which trilogies you like more. But for me, I think the stuff they do with the Force in 7, 8, 9 is definitely the most interesting the Force has ever been, without question. There's also implications that tie back, like you're saying, to the midichlorians. And so my thing is like these beings who have the Force, the Jedi, how could they possibly understand midichlorians to be as simple as Qui-Gon says it is in the beginning? And I think maybe for people who are not familiar with hard magic systems and soft magic systems, soft magic system is just that we as the viewer, we're not aware of the rules, and there might not be rules. And when those rules get broken, if we see inconsistencies, we're just like, it's just not explained basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas a hard magic system is the rules are very concrete, and we are aware of them.
Yeah.
But you know, the rules can be concrete in the soft magic system too. We just don't know.
Yes.
So it could be that these inconsistencies are because of specific circumstances being met, and we're just not, you know, we don't know enough to know that that's the case.
That is true, and we call that lazy writing.
See, I feel
situations,
like in some situations for sure, like absolutely, but in others, it's like, so this amazing thing happens once, and we go, that was amazing. Why has that never happened again? And then later on, we see it happen again, and then we understand, like, oh, that was the same thing that happened then. Like, I'm thinking of like Harry Potter specifically, like his mother was able to stop the whatever because the power of love or something. Like,
yes,
that's dumb. Don't get me wrong, but like, then if we see that happen again, it makes sense because like, oh, you have to save the person you love. Or like, I think of like Naruto, like gaining access to the Sharingan, you have to see someone you love get killed, stuff like that. Where you might be like, how does that guy have it? And then flashback, I watch my friends die, or whatever the case may be. Anyways, all this to say, I don't think, I have my own interpretation of how the midichlorians work, which is obviously no one really knows besides George, and I don't even think he had it all ironed out.
He did not.
But my interpretation is that these things are drawn or randomly, you know, part of people. But I think the galaxy, as it's always said in Star Wars, is always trying to balance itself out. So I think the midichlorians are just the way that the galaxy acts, and so they give more to this kid who was just born, or this person, or this dyad in the Force, or whatever the case may be, this type of creature. And then, but I think also the midichlorians can be influenced. And my interpretation is that the midichlorians didn't choose Anakin. I definitely think Palpatine was like, that woman, and just impregnated her basically with the midichlorians, an artificial type of thing, so that he can make his ultimate vessel. The way we see in episode 9, him making a successor to inhabit, I think that was his ultimate plan with Anakin that got ruined when his limbs were chopped off. Anyways, I'm getting off topic a little bit. Will, thoughts on Star Wars as a magic system?
I think so. Like most of, like, I'll be honest, I kind of stopped caring about Star Wars like when the Disney buy purchase happened. Mostly because like I've always been a massive fan of the expanded universe, specifically with the Old Republic. So like I know like in the Old Republic, like with like the old Jedi Temple and organization, like there were like subclasses of Jedi like based on Force and like lightsaber ability. So like I've always kind of like that. Like some are just better at kind of, I guess, like growing stuff. Was one. There's like one that are just like solely Jedi who are just only use the Force to like enhance like their combat abilities. Like kind of like how like I mentioned, like Yoda would use the Force to like throw himself around and stuff.
Right.
That's how I've always kind of liked the Force. But like I know like they kind of like it was used like in the books to like basically just as like a literary device to like explain these abilities. Like there was like force manipulation of like fire and stuff like that. Like it was kind of almost like Avatar-ish. But like that's how like I've always kind of enjoyed the Force. Like I always thought what we see in the movies was always like kind of like just like the surface level of, I guess, like what was possible. But like I guess maybe it'd be like kind of hard because like some people are just like we're portrayed as like being restricted to like this ability. Like, yeah, you have like midichlorians or force abilities, but like you can only do like you're only capable of like hitting this max level ceiling of like this specific thing. So like for example, like I said, like there was like a Jedi like sub order where you're just basically just like get dropped off onto a planet and just like help the agricultural system just by like growing plants and like that kind of stuff, or like creating Jedi temples and like manipulating stuff around you, or just specifically like a warrior subclass. So like I've seen like arguments like just like people talking like comment section stuff like that, which like I kind of see it, but I guess just like overall it is super soft, I'd say.
Yeah.
So pretty much is like how like Lord of the Rings, it just happens because they can.
Well, and the thing too about Lord of the Rings is there's like, I don't know, 3 or 4 individuals that actually have access to the magic system, and especially in the films, like it's just things just sort of happen. Like there's no invocations or flares of magic, unless we're talking about like the White Council maybe, and Sauron. But I think outside of that, I which I appreciate, because that magic feels like it's part of the world, and so I think the
very
world
much
just
is.
so
like,
I think the world just reacts to these people calling on it and changes in the way that they asked. But for
and
the
like
Force,
most of the magic
sorry,
because like most of the magic users in Lord of the Rings are of magic themselves.
Yeah.
So it's just almost like a force of nature, I guess. But I guess just like in the way it's used is very, I would say it's kind of soft.
Yeah, I think we all agree Force is soft as fuck, for being honest. Like, I don't know if there's a better example of a soft system. If you're, on one hand you have this, and the other hand you have the Force, where the rules of the Force change as the director changes, or as the writer, I should say. But I don't think that's wrong. I think that, because I think when you have a soft system, that almost should be the approach, because it's just as if we were all 3 Force users here, just as we all might use the abilities differently in our own creative way, I think the writers and creators should be able to do the same. Like if you say like the Force can make you run fast, then the Force should also be able to make me stop a bullet in the air, type of thing.
I agree, but the issue is that you lose continuity.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to tell me, so the issue, for example, one of the issues I have with 789 is Rey goes from being somebody who knows nothing about Jedi or the Force to an absolute master in like what, 25 minutes? Like she picks up a lightsaber for the first time and then fights and beats Kylo Ren.
Who's injured? He got shot.
It doesn't matter. He's a Jedi. Like, come on. Like
subpar training.
And she discovers the ability to force heal. Is she the first person to ever force heal?
No.
So then why was that nowhere in 1 through 6?
It's not in 1 through 6, but it is part of the expanded universe. More specifically, we see it canonically in Mandalorian prior to the release of episode 9. So it is a thing that was established in Star Wars canon. Even, you know, as far back as like the expanded universe, that was a thing. I believe in some of the canon novels before Episode 9, it's also stated there. There's also Book of Jedi, Book of Sith. These very they weren't like official releases. They're almost more designed to be like children's books. But there is reference to Force abilities, different types, which do actually get used in the movies. And Rian Johnson actually cited one of those books to like, yeah, see, people can travel distances with the Force without being there, type of thing.
See, that's even okay, but then the way you use it in that movie, what she heals a stupid ass snake, like that's you know, like this should not be about the movies. I can't like this is not about the plot of the movies, which was just
there's an important distinction though. Like
yeah.
and I don't disagree with you that sometimes the people who are making the films use the Force in a way plot wise that I feel is not earned. But I don't think that it's an indictment on the magic system itself. Like
it's not, and
like
that's why this shouldn't be.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right. Like it's not an indictment of the magic system, and that's why I don't want to be talking about it, because this is more an indictment of the plot and the decisions of the creators.
Yeah. But I like, so say, let's go back to Episode 9, Rey pulling the transport out of the sky. Like, I know some people feel like that wasn't earned because that's a very tough thing to do as far as we're concerned by what we've seen prior to. But that's how the Force works. You can pull things and push things towards yourself. So
you know, I mean, in the Force Unleashed, you can pull it down an entire destroyer,
which was dumb, which was fucking dumb.
But in this book, hold down the controllers.
Yeah, this Legend of Luke Skywalker. That's like one of the people who's there is like, yeah, I was on one of those star scrapers, and this guy was literally riding lightning and breathing in space, like just taking out star destroyers on Jakku. Like that's one of the stories. It's fucking nuts, but like
Princess Leia pulling the ship towards her instead of flying into it.
Okay, now you just hit it for me. I was Mr. Positive, and then you reminded me of that moment, and I was like, fuck.
But this is about the magic system.
Let's stay on target. Stay on target.
As a side note, I guess I remember looking into the Game of Thrones stuff because I went through a big phase after we had our initial unreleased episode on magic systems. And like there was an argument that Game of Thrones, the magic used in it, a show or a book series, mostly book series because there's more magic in that, is hard in that all magic comes at a cost, even though you don't exactly know it, but there is some kind, like a lot of magic in Game of Thrones, or like a Song of Ice and Fire is like blood magic. And well, like I wonder if you could say that like the dark side of the Force, because I think we've been talking about a light side abilities, might kind of fall into that. Because like I know in the expanded universe, what was canon until Disney was like Anakin hit his peak power level. Like he was the most powerful being of all time when he was killing all the Jedi, like all of his friends and coworkers and like all these people that he was close to when he was in the Jedi Temple. Like,
that hasn't been specifically retconned, but the vibe I got, I very much disagree with that. But go ahead.
Really?
Like, because I think the Force is what makes a Force user, like, you know, we've seen in Star Wars, there are people who are exceptionally talented with martial hand-to-hand combat, or even fighting people who have lightsabers, right? Like we've seen this. So I don't think Anakin being able to best other Jedi is what actually makes him terrifying. I think it's when he has most of his body's electronic at a certain point,
that's true,
and he's still able to call on the Force, you know, and use it more strongly than anybody else. That's terrifying. Like,
I mean, like I think that's kind of like training and just like getting used to it over time and just like moving your ceiling up
Mhm.
compared to like that just like one brief moment for a couple of hours where he was just like absolutely unstoppable.
Yeah. It
Like
sort of reminds me of like Daredevil, right? Like having
yeah,
the inability to see actually tones his senses to become stronger than the average person. But I think it's like Vader with the lack of limbs after he gets, fucked up by Obi-Wan. I think that makes him like no other Jedi has ever, as far as we know, anyways, has ever had to lose that ability and then gain it back in that such a way and then switch to the dark side in doing so. I
yeah.
don't know. I think that's just a perfect circumstance to make someone who's just like unreal powerful,
That's why we need a new updated Darth Vader movie to see that. Because
Well,
I
we
think
got that scene
cool.
at Rogue One.
That wasn't enough. That was a tease.
But see, I love that. I don't like. I don't need a Vader movie. His slow movements in Episode 4, even the way he walks in Rogue One, he's so slow, and I think that's what makes it even more scary. He's like a horror movie character. Like you're running and he's just walking behind you. He's so powerful that he doesn't even want to rush himself.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. He'll just pull you towards him.
Yeah. Actually, did you guys ever play the most recent Star Wars game, Fallen Order?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like the Darth Vader scene in that was like the most terrifying thing. Cause like also because like as a side note, like none of the game mechanics like give you hints at first until you die like 20 times at one specific point, like I did. But like in that moment, it's like actually kind of terrifying because like you're completely outclassed by this like one of the most powerful like things in the universe.
Right. Yeah, and even I think the music there is also like takes a dark turn, and you're like spoilers for anyone who hasn't played. You're watching like your master get absolutely wrecked by Darth Vader, and he's just like turning this base where you're fighting him inside out to get to you. It's terrifying.
And like it's like very little effort too. But like he's still like moving a little bit faster, but like it's just like complete ease. Whereas like in the game, like you spend so many hours just learning how to do force push and force pull.
Right.
Whereas he's just like snap of his fingers and like the entire building that you're in gets turned inside out.
Yeah. And going back to like, let's say force speed, right? Like in the books, there's a book called, I think it's called Lords of the Sith. And it takes place between episode 4 and episode 3. So Vader now in the suit, learning, relearning how to be. And it takes place on like the planet Ryloth, and there's like a rebel faction, and they go in and they get marooned, him and Sidious, on this planet, and they have to sort of fight through this jungle. And he's like learning how to use the force again to propel himself through force speed without actually having to walk. And I don't know, the way they explain it in that book is just like, so I think it's I can't even remember. Philip K. No, that's Ubik. I can't remember the author, but super well done. Yeah, but I think like you were saying, Luca, like the books have more ability to explain what's going on, whereas I think the beauty of the original trilogy was having that sort of fantastical element in that, oh, this guy's lifting the X-Wing with his mind, and there is no explanation, and that's what makes it fantastic. Whereas I think like now, maybe it's like because I'm older, or maybe it's a societal thing, we've sort of maybe not entitlement is the best word, but like we would like to know how it works, so that we can continue to enjoy it in the other iteration. Because if we're not explained at all, I don't know, then I think it leaves the door open for things to just not make sense at all, and that feels very unrewarding as a
exactly
viewer.
For example, like how you said you interpret midichlorians as Palpatine having put midichlorians into like purposely creating Anakin, essentially.
Yeah,
but like that's a cool theory, but since it's not canon, it's nothing, which makes it
I almost want to say they confirmed it under the Disney era, but I could be wrong.
Really hope not, because I'm sick of Palpatine, man. Like, anyway, this is another. I keep diving into.
No, but I think it has to do with the magic system. Like one person who's able to abuse it so much, and no one else is even coming close. And so much that it feels like this is our. I know this word is iffy on this podcast, but Palpatine's almost the MacGuffin of. We don't know how he works. We don't even know what he is. Like, and he's able to change everything about how the system works as far as like the subtext goes, right? Like,
yes. And do you know why I would hate it so much that they confirmed it in the Disney era? Because they did zero work with Star Wars. They were like, oh, let's grab the villain from 1 through 6 and just do it again after like teasing Snoke for 2 whole movies, and he gets cut in half like that. And then like in the pre-credit scene, we're gonna be like, oh, Palpatine's back. Like, I hate it so much.
I just checked, it is confirmed.
I hate that. I hate everything about it.
It even takes place in a comic book where there's like
and is this in the Disney era?
I believe so.
Yeah,
I can't really
everything. Everything about that I hate.
I think in the expanded universe, I think they did it a little bit better because it was Plagueis that was heavily implied through like a science experiment.
Which is another great book that deals with a lot of Force. Darth Plagueis, the book, I think by James Luceno.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that book is fantastic. It's like a mafia movie mixed with like this fantastical element. But Palpatine and Plagueis are working towards being able to create life with the Force. Okay. And once they hit the breakthrough, it's implied that they hit the breakthrough right around the time where Anakin would be born.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, it's just heavily implied. Then Sidious is like, I don't need this guy anymore. And as Sith do, takes out Plagueis and becomes the Sith Lord. And so I don't know, that for me in the expanded universe was always confirmation. I don't know too much about the Disney one if they have confirmed it, but for me, that's always been canon, because otherwise, what was the point of the Immaculate Conception thing?
Mm-hmm. If that was the original intent, that's okay. The reason I hate that in the Disney era is because Disney did everything so lazy. They put zero effort into everything they did, other than special effects. Like, literally, they put zero effort, like zero. That was not a planned trilogy. It was, those movies are not, that was just like, let's make a movie, let's make another one, and let's make a third, and let's call it a trilogy.
I don't mind saying Disney didn't put effort into the movie trilogy. I like, it's a tough thing to say, but I think everybody who worked on those films and wrote those films put everything they had into it, because it's fucking Star Wars, and why wouldn't you? That's like a dream for a lot of people. And so I just think because there was no overarching story direction plan, we get these inconsistencies with the power level. And I think,
and just the story.
Yeah, for sure. But I think Disney, and more specifically, I think Lucasfilm overall has done such a great job rebuilding the canon, because let's face it, the expanded universe, there's a lot of great stuff in there. There's a lot of nonsense, absolute nonsense. And if you hate Palpatine coming back all the time in actual canon, you don't want to read the fucking, that's all it is.
The clones.
Clones of him, clones that he made of other people, his daughters and his servants that, end up, it's dumb. Some of it's fucking stupid. Him taking over control of the galaxy, his master plan was being able to defend it from the Yuzong Vong, which is like some invading alien force from another galaxy. So it's a little bit much.
I think just with, I guess, this new era of Star Wars, I think the thing that gripes me the most, like, I am still salty about the EU getting like just brushed away like 30 years worth of stuff, but it's like, but I think my biggest gripe, and like the way I see it, is that like Disney, and this is kind of their MO with like their other IPs like the Avengers, where they just lock all this extra detailed information behind a paywall. Like, you have to buy these comic books or these books or audiobooks to learn more about these characters that like you could just explain it in a movie.
I don't know if that's intentional. I think it's more like, hey, if we write a book about Saw Gerrera, people will buy it. Not like, don't give too much about Saw Gerrera because we're going to put out the book. Like, this, like, Disney is so far removed from the creative like story team at Lucas, which in itself is a problem. But I don't think there's like this like backdoor conspiracy that Disney's trying to make you read their books. I don't think they care too much. I think people who are like ultra passionate about Star Wars are being like, wouldn't this be a cool story to tell? And then they're giving that to someone who wants to write that story. And I don't know if that's a bad thing. And also, we talked earlier about interpretation, right? Especially again, I keep pulling up this book, but there's people who have seen and interacted with Luke Skywalker who tell his story differently than we see it unfold. And I think that's what the expanded universe is now. There's some of those stories still make their way into canon. Even like Korriban becoming Moribond or whatever, maybe it's the inverse. All things like that. I don't think, for me, I've read expanded universe books, again, like Darth Plagueis and stuff, which, like, I don't know, like, if you have to consider Star Wars canon as canon. I think just the same way that some fantasy stories have a different interpretation of what a Wendigo is, you can interpret the Force in different ways too. Yeah, I just don't think like the EU wipe was like as big of a trap. Like, those books are still there. You can still read them if you want. It's fine. Like, and you know, no one can come and tell you that like that story doesn't matter anymore. It's just not a part of this current story they're telling. But to someone in the Star Wars universe and a fan of Star Wars, that story's still true. So, you know, and if you enjoyed it, then fucking enjoy it again. Like, you know,
True, but nerd rage.
Nerd rage is a real thing. And when they don't get me wrong, I'm preaching right now, but like when there was like an instance where like that Lords of the Sith book, there was an inconsistency with an episode of Star Wars Rebels, and I was like, what the fuck I buy all these books for? They don't even care.
That was me in Republic Commandos. Those are like one of my favorite book series of all time. And then I don't know. I just don't want to watch anything to do with those characters, even though they are in the new canon.
They are, and they're well done. But I mean, I understand when you have this version of something, it's like, here's the new Disney one for $15.99. You're like, you know, maybe not.
I wanted to ask, so we have Jedi and we have Sith. From what I understand, from the magic system's perspective, the difference between the two is purely philosophical.
Sort of. Yeah. I think when you have a magic system that's as soft as Star Wars, the difference between what's good and what's bad comes down to a personal level. But there are users within the Star Wars canon that use both light and dark sides of the Force, or just use the dark side of the Force and aren't inherently evil beings. Like the Night Sisters, for instance.
Yeah.
They use like this weird type of the dark side of the Force, which is like, it's more similar to like magic. And there's a visual cue for like, it's like this green, misty. Yeah. And they're not inherently evil. They do some messed up things, but like, they're just different. And they get their power from Dathomir, which is like this planet, which is like infused with like dark side magic.
Right. But what is dark side Force versus light Force?
Dark side Force to me is destructive. Whereas like the instances we see of the light side of the Force are not. Pushing and pulling something can be used that way, but it's not inherently evil or destructive. Whereas like you're saying, there was Force users in the EU that could create fire. And as we see in Star Wars, the Force lightning, like lightning and fire are things that are, to me anyways, inherently destructive, or can be used that way more often. Whereas like we wouldn't see a light side Force user, or a Jedi, I should say, use that type of magic.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I've always seen it as like light and dark sides just exist regardless of the philosophies. I think philosophies were just used as a way for people, I guess, to become adept at either or.
But what you guys are saying is there's no actual, like, a Jedi can use Force lightning, they just choose not to.
That's
which means from the perspective of the magic system, there is no dark and light side. There's only the Force, and how you use it and what you do with it makes you a Sith, Jedi, or any other.
I don't think there's like here's like say if we're comparing it to D&D, there's the weave where people pull magic from. Good people and bad people use that, but then there's also like the shadow weave, which is a different type of magic system. It's not like that at all. It's just one shared magic system, and there's elements of it that are more harmful than the other ones. And so I think the Jedi are the ones responsible for that narrative, dark side or light side. I don't know if that's a real thing as far as the Force is concerned. I think that's a good point though. Like,
but there are
even from the movie. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, but there like are like light and dark side like Force entities. Like I think it's almost more of like just a nature part of the world, as you would, because I think that's kind of like how, like in like the OG EU explanation, I think that's how it was. Like it's just one, and that like these two sides just existed regardless of people. And then it's just like philosophies grew just because nobody knew how to use it and I guess approaches properly. So like I've always viewed like Jedi as like a force of order, as like don't use the dark side because like you could just have like I don't know, anyone controlling lightning is generally not a good thing, right? So
yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like
it's just like one big safety guide.
The Jedi are who they are because they choose not to access that power. And that's why there's always warnings about it. Because I think it's one of those things like when you go that way, there's no way you can come back to never using Force choke or Force lightning to get what you want. You know, it's like I think it's just like allegorical for temptation.
Yeah. Because I mean, like if you had the ability to like Force choke someone, it'd probably be a lot easier to do. Like
all Jedi have the ability to do it. Like the Force abilities that Jedi have shown are extremely deadly. They just choose not to murder people with them.
Yeah,
like,
and yeah, I definitely think the dark side of the Force is an individual's restraint or level of restraint. Like there are episodes of the Clone Wars where I think Ahsoka gets taken and Anakin's looking for her.
She gets kidnapped,
and because he's so attached to her, as you're not supposed to form attachments as Jedi, because he's so attached to her, his emotions get the best of him, and he's like Force choking soldiers and stuff to get answers out of them. And so you start to see like it's not just like I fell into this well and now I have dark side power or whatever the fuck. It's like it's someone who can't show restraint or someone who has formed those attachments. Now there are also things that point towards the Jedi were totally wrong. And that's why the Jedi are no more. That's why Luke wants to end the Jedi. And I think this is the thing that bugs me the most about the sequel trilogy. In that when it ends, Rey is going about to, or at least it's implied that she will continue on the Jedi or Skywalker legacy. I think that's wrong. I think the Jedi ended because like their view of the Force was dogmatic, as Sidious says. And there are beings in the world who are manifestations of both sides of the Force, and they identify that way. There's a creature called like the Bendu, and he says like I am the one in the middle. Like I don't make distinctions between dark side. There's always a need for destruction and creation, and I think that's probably more like a more correct way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I like in the EU expanded universe, Luke's new Jedi temple, or like the first iteration, like the like dark side stuff was kind of like maybe not like welcome, but it wasn't like a conservative environment where you had to like repress emotions. Right. And like a lot of like his like pupils that he took on were like people like Kyle Katarn, who's like a fully grown adult, as opposed to just like being a kid. Like it was kind of like learn how to like control your emotions and like acknowledge them and like not just like repress them.
Yeah, because I think that's a failure of the Jedi is when you take the kids and teach them this one way. Anything other than that is they consider wrong. And I
Yeah.
think we see like through
Without
Luke,
giving an
especially-
explanation as well.
Yeah, through Luke, we see that like emotions don't make you a worse Jedi, but I don't know. Like this Jedi is just a concept that shouldn't exist. Being one-sided on everything is wrong to me. I don't know. How do you feel about Luca?
Well, that's what I was asking, because like even when Darth Sidious is explaining it to Anakin in the third film, like he calls it like acts like the dark side is a path to many powers, like some would deem unnatural, you know, like the whole being able to bring people back to life and or like predict the future and all these like amazing powers. Yeah, it's just like, so I just thought it was like the way they say it, it's almost like it's a new type of power that you can gain access to by like becoming a Sith, but it's not really. Like Anakin could have just stayed a Jedi and explored those powers.
But that's where I disagree.
Right. Okay, that is not true. He couldn't stay a Jedi.
Yeah.
He could not become evil and explore those same powers.
But the only way for him to get it was the knowledge of how to do it through Sidious, who had, you know, his motivations, and this is what you need to do for me to get access to. And it's that choice that turns him from being a Jedi, right? Yeah. The unspeakable things he does afterwards are obviously pushing him further down that road. But it's that shift being like, I'm willing to give up my view of how the Force works to partner with you and learn different things. That's when he stops being a Jedi, right?
Yeah. Also, like as a cool side note to that, I think it was on like Star Wars Explained or something like that, or Star Wars Theories. One of those YouTube channels, like they kind of like the reason why Anakin was like enraged in the third film for not becoming like getting to the council, not being like a Jedi master, is because he wasn't able to access what was deemed master level information, even though it wasn't really. And like in that information being like, is there not an ability to like either prolong life or save someone's life kind of thing.
But that's just furthers the point that like if that was his motivation to becoming a master, then he wasn't ready for it, and they made the right decision. You know?
But I thought it was like kind of cool because I think it was explained in a comic book or a novel, one of the two. But like it was kind of like, but like when you watch it, it's just like he kind of seems like emotionally unstable, or just like kind of having like this almost like a temper tantrum. But it was kind of cool to like hear in the background that like his motivation was like, his intent was definitely good.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of like, I don't know, like Jedi's again, like highly conservative nature of just like, why not just talk to these people and let them know?
But it goes back to what Yoda initially told him. Attachment leads to that leads to anger, that leads to or loss, or I can't remember the exact quotes. But that's why they don't form attachments. It's because attachments like those will lead you on a path that eventually you're, forsaking what make the Jedi. So yeah, I don't know. I love that sort of philosophical difference being the only difference between dark and light, because that just shows you how easy it is to go from being what the Jedi consider being a good person to being this person who just abuses the power that the universe bestowed on them randomly, type of thing. I think that's like an important one.
Is it random also in this magic system? Like it doesn't seem to be given 1 through 9, like the film canon.
Yeah. So the one thing too is like, if it's so the Jedi don't reproduce, right? And so I think that's why they go and get children who have this high count, is because they, in their opinion, it's because the universe wanted those children too. And if they do, have offspring, it's like an unfair sort of thing, because then it's not the universe, it's just that this is your kid, and so they're granted your blood type of thing. And that's as much as like that's why Luke has his powers, that's why Rey has her powers. And so they're not truly, their powers weren't bestowed on them by the universe as a balancing way. which I think is pretty interesting. That these individuals that have been our heroes, Luke, Leia, Rey, should have never been. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't know. And Anakin, for that matter, too. If he was truly made by Palpatine, he also shouldn't have been, a part of this narrative.
Yeah. And then from that same like thing, wouldn't the universe, in order to balance the creation of Anakin, bestow maybe equal power to a random? But again, that doesn't, there's no need for balance in the situation where there is no dark and light side. Because regardless of how many Jedi or like Force users or people with high midichlorian counts there are, it's in balance because it's all one energy. It's all one force.
The balancing thing is, I think we may be like not touching on enough, because I think it's like one of the things that makes the Force what it is, at least in the interpretation of the people within the universe, right? It's always the Force is trying to balance itself, or we need balance in the Force, or there's an imbalance in the Force. I know a lot of people look at the Jedi Purge as being that balance. You go from having 10,000 Jedi at the time of the Geonosis, beginning of the Clone Wars. And by the end of it, there's maybe hundreds of Jedi and 2 Sith. So I don't know. To some people, that's balancing in a way. To others, it's just a terrible thing that happened. But also, Yoda says, maybe the prophecy was misread, and that the Force will be a child of the Force who brings balance to it. That definition or description fits for both Anakin, who was made by the Force, and Luke, whose father was made by the Force. So in turn, he's also made by the Force. And, he's just as much as random as Anakin is in that same way. So yeah, I don't know.
I always thought it was like strange how they like keep talking about like there's that scene in the gunship with like Mace Windu where he's like, do you really think he is like the chosen one to balance the Force? Because I mean, like, if you haven't seen the Sith in like 1,000 years or whatever, and then some dude just like rolls up who's supposed to be one who like balances the Force, like, wouldn't you be like kind of concerned that like maybe we're the ones out of balance?
Yeah, but they were so like it's in their hubris that they.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like, if you haven't seen like evil or like encountered like a true Dark Lord in like quite some time.
But right when they find Anakin, that's when the Sith revealed himself, which is ultra convenient if you're Sidious.
True.
Right?
Yeah, I was kind of strange.
It's almost like as if Sidious revealed Maul to the Jedi at the same time that they found Anakin to distract from,
That is an interesting point, given that would make a lot of sense with the Palpatine created Anakin theory.
Right.
Or canon, I don't know, undetermined. But given everything that we've discussed, the Jedi are an absolutely essential organization in the galaxy. Like I absolutely think so, because you need like that hardcore, morally untouchable group that like even if some of their interpretations are wrong, you cannot give that kind of power out into the open to let people choose what they want to do with it when they want to do with it.
I don't know.
That is how you get anarchy and chaos and many
but to some people in the outer rims who've never seen a Jedi and the Jedi don't answer their calls, they probably, the Jedi are an oppressive organization to them. They're hoarding the power. They're coming and they're taking our young and saying that they're Force sensitive and they should come with us. And we don't see the benefits of that.
Yeah,
absolutely. I 100% agree with what you're saying, but I stand by what I said. Like, you need that organ, because think of what would happen without the Jedi. Like, you will have other people rounding up. Like, once somebody realizes that this is possible, organizations are inevitable. So like, if you don't have this one centralized, like the one light side, you will have many pockets of both light and dark, and you will have chaos everywhere where they're clashing.
But we sort of get that though, right? Like,
I mean, you do get it, like, but you didn't have it in the like main areas where the Jedi were active, right? Like anybody who was born with midichlorian, I don't know how they measure this or how they find people that are high on midichlorian counts.
yeah, I think it's sort of like a Professor X Cerebro thing.
Okay.
They like sense them, but there's I think there's also a database that shows up in like Rebels that the Empire has like records of these children.
Well, that's how they made like the Inquisitors. It's like,
right
here we registered this. Now take this space diabetes test, and now you're an Inquisitor.
Yeah, I think Jedi is like the Jedi Order would be absolutely essential.
But I think, like, to your point though, there was a Sith Order at a time, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but the thing about the Sith Order is because it was the dark side is destructive in nature, they basically just cannibalized themselves until I think it's Darth Bane creates the rule of two, being like, this doesn't work as a group. And I think it's on Moraban that they create this super weapon that I think he says will destroy the Jedi. And really what it is, it's like a bomb and destroys all the Sith on the planet. There's like this, like they go there and they find all like the remains of these Jedi and Sith in like this battle. And so they wipe out all the Sith except for two who probably get away. And then eventually thousands of years later, that leads to Palpatine and Anakin. So yeah, I don't think there can be dark side users who are acting on their own accord, but I don't think they work as a group. And I think the Jedi do to a certain extent. But yeah, I don't know. I just think over time it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, like I think they're necessary, but like the Jedi Temple, but like I wouldn't want to consider them the ultimate authority.
No, like, but you maybe not the ultimate authority, like everything they say is correct. But
I don't know. I think
yeah,
I don't know. I think you just need options.
Sure,
bring me back the Sith Empire.
Maybe a gray, a gray zone of or maybe an organization that's not as I don't know how to in the light side as the Jedi, because that made them sort of well, Matt, you said in their hubris they didn't notice like all these signs of their own destruction.
Yeah.
So like maybe a more in the middle organization would be better. But I think without something like the Jedi Temple, if people start realizing they can like learn these abilities on their own, you will have much worse situations than what it was when there was the Jedi Temple.
Interesting. But does it get much worse than the Sith Lord ruling the galaxy?
Well, that happened. I don't know.
As a result of the Jedi, right? Because there's like a false sense of security, and then immediately over the span of like a year, the Jedi are gone now completely. No one even remembers them 20 years later.
Yeah, which
Sith Lord rolling the galaxy.
Right, but while they were there was none. So if you have none of them, you'll probably have like multiple Sith Lords ruling a whole planet or like one system, or which will be terrible for the people living on that planet.
But the Jedi were around the whole time that Anakin and his mom were being sold from owner to owner as slaves on Tatooine.
Right,
the planet that's in their database. So
okay, yeah, true, but you can't expect like they're not going to police every single situation. Like they're, you can't be like blame. I don't know. It's like being like, oh, I got like mugged. Fuck you, government.
So where do you draw the line though? Like slavery and like
no,
we do see Jedi go on some pointless missions sometimes. So
yeah, like, for sure. I'm talking about purely in like I'm not talking about like the Jedi as the police of every single planet. They deal with Force users. That is their domain. Their domain is not like every single social issue on every single planet.
But then who deals with the Jedi?
Yeah.
Well, like, what if they become corrupt?
Like if you look at like
Jedi,
like Darth creates like rule of one, like he creates like a Sith kingdom while the Jedi Temple is operating.
Yeah.
And like they eventually win just because they just overpower it, because rule of one is like incredibly dangerous. But yeah, I don't know.
there's a lot of unknowns because it's such a soft system. You don't like does everybody have midichlorians also? That's like
I think so, because I think the force is your ability to influence midichlorians. Maybe that's the wrong interpretation, but so I think like being able to pull someone is like you're reaching out and feeling their midichlorians.
Okay.
And pulling them.
That sounds the way it sounds to me too. Like it's essentially a force or like an energy or a creature that lives in everything that exists in the galaxy.
Yeah. To mention that there are different, like not everybody, this galaxy is huge, obviously. Not everybody calls it the force, but it is something that's a universal thing that at least on a lot of places in the galaxy is known, this sort of thing that binds people together. There's one instance, there's a planet, I can't remember the name. They ride these 4-winged birds. I think they're called deek-deeks. Yeah. And Luke actually goes there. That's where that fishing spear he gets from The Last Jedi. It's from that planet, because they hunt on these birds and get fish in the sea. But they call it the tide, and it's like the push and pull of the world. And that's within all of us. Then there's also these, I'm going to read a part of this book. There's these like statues that are like frozen in time. And they say they controlled something called the luminous mist. We are the master weavers of the luminous mist. Our art was to knot and entwine the strings of mist that cradled all sentient species and connected the far-flung worlds to one another, which is like just a different way to say luminous beings are we. The force binds and surrounds us, it penetrates us all, type of thing. So I think it's interesting that like the force is like this universal feeling or force, and that like the Jedi just have one interpretation of it, and to far-flung planets that the Jedi never have been to, there's people who are, have control over the force. They just don't operate the same way as the Jedi, and they don't need to. You know what I mean? I love that sort of the magic system is more than its users type of thing.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, like I think it's just allegorical to like just a part of nature.
Yeah.
Like as the wind is to us kind of thing, but people could just learn how to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how this relates, but in The Last Jedi, there's that, I guess you could call it like a mural, or a mosaic rather, of the Prime Jedi, I think it's called. So like the first ever Jedi who founded that temple on Ahch-To that Luke's at. And in that mosaic, half of the beads or the stones behind him are white and half are black. And he's standing there, I think, with a lightsaber. And I think in somewhere on Ahch-To, there's like a very crude prototype of a lightsaber, and it's just 2 kyber crystals that you press together, which is cool, but not related. But anyway, so this Prime Jedi, he wasn't a light side force user or a dark side one. He just knew how to use the force and found people who are like him, or like them, I should say, and made an order with them. So I don't even think the Jedi's origins come from being a light side. I think at one point they were like, we need rules. And exactly over a millennia, it was like the rules have become so strict that like we don't even care about people. We don't form any sort of attachments. We just do this because it's our job. And I think that's what made the Jedi not effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all true. My only point with the Jedi are necessary is if you're going to have a group that's instilling knowledge into the people that can use this power, it's better for them to be on the hardcore morally upright side than the opposite.
Fair enough. But I think like if everyone has these inside of them, just at different concentrations, everybody should be given the fair shake. You know what I mean?
Disagree.
I like on a, like in a real world level, I'm with you in that if we all had fire powers, like if this was the Avatar bending world and everyone was a bender, like that's scary to me.
Mhm.
But then society adjusts,
Yeah.
right? But I think if the benders just immediately came out and were like, yeah, now we run stuff, it'd be like, okay, I'm not comfortable with that. Like,
Mhm.
so
But from what I understand, Jedi don't rule over anything.
well, they don't until they became basically like the Senate's police force.
Okay.
But prior to, they were like a neutral sort of body who went and dispatched dark side energy or whatever the case may be, and
Mhm.
were fighting. But eventually, because of that, they have to be a part of the Senate. Sort of contractors, third party contractors. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Any closing thoughts? So I guess again, we all think it's a soft magic system
Mhm.
for sure. Actually, before we stop here, what are your favorite force powers and just favorite instances of the force?
You can go first, Glenn, to think about this.
I can't think of like how I mentioned earlier, just like the different subclasses from the Old Republic, because that's like my favorite era of Star Wars.
Oh, I'm talking about canon. No, I'm just go ahead.
I think like the combat force groups, I think that was pretty cool. Like it's pretty much just like, I think it was pretty much just space samurai is how they were depicted. So I always thought that was kind of cool, or like space knights, which are, I think you could see a little bit like in Star Wars Rebels, and like with the armor and stuff like that and different weaponry.
Yeah.
But like I always thought like probably the most useful ability is just like the ability to grow things and like control like plants. I think just overall, because you could just never have to worry about, like you could just land, like you'd be like dropped off onto a planet, you could just like basically terraform the place. So, which is like oddly, like that was like the lowest level of like Jedi class. Like it was pretty much just like, oh, you do have force abilities, but like you're not that useful in a martial sense. But probably like realistically the most useful one overall.
Fair enough. I also forgot to mention there's it's only in Star Wars Rebels. There's this thing called the World Between Worlds, which is also part of the Force, but highlights this different plane of existence, which is purely Force, allows the ability to travel through time. But we also see in that Palpatine like doing this weird incantation over like a flaming pot. So like I don't even like the dark side of the Force is weird, man. Like some
Yeah,
weird like
I mean,
black
Force
magic.
lightning is fucking cool. That's the other thing. Like, yeah, especially because it's so like destructive too. Like, I think like obviously in the movies it looks cool because it's just lightning bolts, but I know like in a lot of book sources and stuff like that, like the destructive nature is like it can like damage someone like for life or like cripple them.
And it's always described as like the embodiment of destruction, like being able to pull on the Force and just like calling for destruction, and that's what comes out.
Yeah,
it's so cool.
I think there's like something even like it could kill like the victims like midichlorians or something like that. Like,
oh wow, that's fucked.
Like I've seen it like depicted. I'm not sure if it was fan fiction or just somewhere like on a YouTube channel video, but like it was pretty much just like you could like sever someone's connection if they're like weaker with their own force abilities or whatever. So if you just like smoke the child with it, like obviously the force of the lightning impact would like kill them, but like if they survived, it could like severely cripple them.
Yeah.
This is one of the issues of a soft system where you're like talking about those abilities and what they could possibly do, and you have no way to answer those questions. But to answer your question, Matt, I think my favorite Force moment might have actually been, I think it was in the 7th movie. It's where Kylo Ren like stops a laser. Like, that was maybe my
cool.
favorite like Force moment in all the movies.
But then we never see it yet.
Exactly.
So it's such a cool movie when he's like taking Poe Dameron and like walking him past his floating in space laser bolt. It's just like so cool. Yeah,
that's my favorite Force moment for sure. Favorite Force power, if I could have like one thing, I mean, discounting all these, like I think jumping, the Force jump would be like so fun to use.
There's also again another instance of force powers we see once and never again. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka are falling. I think it's on Geonosis, falling off like a cliff in Clone Wars and like stop themselves before they hit the ground. And I think he's with some clone troopers. He like levitates them right before they hit the ground, and then they all drop. I'm like, why has it never come up before or after? Like, so useful. I think mine are more like emotionally driven moments. Um, like, okay, so one day we'll have to just have a Last Jedi full discussion, but a lot of my favorite Force abilities come from The Last Jedi, even though overall the movie's not one of my favorites. I think Rian Johnson has a pretty great understanding and interpretation of the Force, even though I think the plot of that movie's really weak. And Leia in space, whatever. But Luke being able to project himself as the prime version of himself, so much so like that light versus dark, that Luke's not even there, and Kylo Ren's just driven by his anger to attack him, and thus letting Luke win and save lives in the process, delaying Kylo Ren enough. I think that's just one of the coolest powers and the coolest reveals. And one of those ones where you go back and watch it and you go, oh, all the side, like we just watched that lightsaber explode. We see his feet go across the ground and none of like the snow or salt rather. Yeah. The way he's dodging is like super uncanny. Just and when the light, all the fucking blaster bolts hit him from the ATM sixes, and he's just like a comedic moment that we didn't need, but like, and then probably one of my favorites is it happens twice, I guess, would be Leia calling out to Luke. So once on the when he's falling from Bespin, when he's hanging on to the thing, he calls out to her and she hears him. And then the other version of that, Kylo Ren and Rey fighting in episode 9, and the only way Rey wins is because Leia uses like the last of her abilities to reach out and just Ben, and then he's like lets up for a second, and gets impaled. Fucking so cool. And I like those moments more so than like
pulling Star Destroyer.
Yeah, because for me that's what the Force is. It's the connection between people, not like the pull sky the fucking thing out of the sky. That's too much. Or like the Rey pulling the transport out of the sky. I love that as well, because you see like her given to like, I'm just gonna do this. I know I can do this. I'm just gonna use all my power, and then it becomes that destructive force, and actually ends up destroying that transport. Well, weird, because like people died there and they were just not concerned. So I wasn't Chewbacca though, so yeah.
You mentioned, sorry, I just have to. You mentioned that. That's one of the things I hate. They had no courage in those movies. They killed Chewbacca. He's alive. They wiped C-3PO's memory. I have a backup. Like nothing had any impact. Anyway,
yeah.
Sorry.
And then they kill off a bunch of like characters that like, why did Nien Nunb have to die? Like, why did Snap Wexley have to die? Like, just like, so we felt like we lost something. It was like, okay. Like, I was devastated when Chewbacca died, and I was like, man, I'm getting old. Sometimes characters are gonna die. And then it was like, oh, he's right here. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Sorry, well, you can go.
Oh yeah. In episode 9, I thought it was cool when they like teleport the lightsaber to Ben. Like when he's fighting the knights.
This is something that people were like, what the fuck? That's not how the Force works. And I was like, well, did you watch Rebels? Because for me, my interpretation of that is they're sending the lightsaber between worlds, that interdimensional pocket where, you can go somewhere where you're not currently at the moment. And for me, I don't know, I fucking love that dyad in the Force thing. Especially if Palpatine's responsible for it. I know like bringing back Palpatine is like controversial, but like I don't know.
And a Force dyad. What the hell is that?
Just two beings in the Force that are connected via their power makes sense to me. Being these two beings that can go between worlds and have this connection, which we haven't seen with any other Force users, which makes sense why they're the exception. Also, Kylo Ren in Episode 7 says, "Grandfather, show me again." Blah 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 blah. And then in Episode 9 is to reveal that like, yeah, none of that was your grandfather. That motherfucker's dead, or he's on the different side of the Force. You know. So I don't know. I think like Palpatine being responsible for linking their minds, because he could also link into Kylo Ren's mind and plant these, false visions. I think is super cool. And I think he says, "I was the one who linked your minds" or something.
Yeah.
Terrible Palpatine. Good. Kill him. Yeah. I don't mind the Force dyad. I thought it was cool.
I didn't understand it. The movie did nothing to explain it.
Sure. And that's the soft magic system.
I know, but then that's what makes it bad. Like it's like the Force dyad. It's like what is that? Like to me, when I was watching, it sounded like he was like, "Oh, we have a Jedi and a Sith, a dyad of like two extreme sides of the Force." But it's like, nah, he was good. Like Kylo Ren was on the good, like they were on the same team at that point. Like that doesn't make any sense. So what, because their minds are linked? Like that's all it takes to make this super powerful dyad? You can link anybody's minds if you could do that. Then like could have done that 20,000 times. It is in the first 6 movies.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like where was this dropping visions into Anakin's mind, or like all this kind of stuff? I'm
going back to something you said. I don't think Kylo Ren was on the light side of the Force at the time that was happening. And because again, I think the light and dark side being more philosophical, I think he taps into the dark side of the Force. He reacts only in anger, whereas Rey doesn't. Or, well, she does, but like, I think that's what separates them. So I don't like, he's a Sith, she's a Jedi. Neither of them are either. He's a Knight of Red and she's just Rey, So I don't know. I think it might be a little bit more than just good guy, bad guy. It's like,
that's how it sounded in the movie. It was like she's a Jedi, you're a Sith. Like I created both of you, and now I'm gonna, I don't know, put your bodies together, and then that'll be my body or some shit. I don't. That was the plot, I guess. Like I don't know what even.
See, I wish more of the plot was explained, but for me, the explanation of the Force abilities was enough that I was like, yeah, that's the Force. I don't think we're supposed to understand how it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like my dislike of Star Wars comes exclusively from writing and decision making in the plot. Like I enjoy the Force as a magic system. I loved the first 6. I mean, I was a child when 1, 2, and 3 came out, so I was like blown away.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Force is a good magic system, super interesting. I might even read some of the EU, and every time you guys said EU, I was like, European Union? Like, what are you guys talking about?
Yeah, that's why actually I said the title right after, because I was like, I should probably not refer to that. It's abbreviation.
Yeah, I think that's maybe why they changed the name. It's all branded as Star Wars Legends now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Smart.
That's funny. Yeah, a lot of their like major novels got like reprinted as well with Legends.
Yeah. There is a book I think I might, after thinking about it, might do for a rumination.
Okay.
It's called Lost Stars by Claudia Gray. It's so good. There's a lot of great ones. But it's all sort of like, I don't disagree with you, Will, that like it feels like a cash grab sometimes, but I think like the people who work on these things care. You can sort of feel it. Yeah.
It's not like a shot at the creative team. I think it's just like ultra like mega corporation MO to just be like, yeah, it's cool, but we're just gonna lock it behind something.
Yeah.
Well, even the way they revealed that Palpatine came back, it was just through Fortnite.
What?
Like, you know how at the beginning of episode 9, it's like, oh, like a radio signal went through the galaxy.
Oh, yeah.
They played that radio signal in Fortnite. Like that's how they revealed it.
I see. I wasn't aware of that, but I do remember that. Yeah.
That is exactly what Will is talking about.
That fucking sucks.
Yep.
Well, that's what happened with Ben's backstory. It's like completely different and like fleshed out. Like, well, it is fleshed out like in the comic book series, but like just the average movie enjoyer would not have known that. Like, I didn't even know it until I was like, yo, what the fuck? There's like 12 episodes of this, or 12 issues.
Even like the entirety of Rogue One, my enjoyment of the film was like it's one of my favorites. But I read, I think it's called Catalyst, novel that involves all the same characters that takes place, I think, 12 years beforehand. And like, I don't know how anyone could enjoy that movie if they didn't have all this prior information. But like, who the fuck is Galen Erso and why should I care about him? It's all in this book. Like, he's a sweet dude, you know? So I don't know. I think there's a disconnect between Disney and Lucasfilm or Lucas. That's just, stopping, closing the door on some really great story opportunities. But, for a lot of people, Star Wars was never that. I think it's a certain subset of fans, which are not the majority of people who watch Star Wars. And there's obviously a lot of us, but like, we don't sell 200 million opening weekend. It's the general audience that doesn't need to know which episode Saw Gerrera appeared in the Clone Wars. Like, so I don't know what the solution is.
The solution is to give
more
Jon
Disney
Favreau,
Plus shows.
Just give Jon Favreau the movie control. Like,
yeah, I'd say Dave Filoni, but
I don't know who that is, but whoever, like,
that's the problem.
The woman who's in charge of it right now, she needs to go. Like, she needs to go today.
I would prefer it to be in someone who's like ultra passionate about it, whereas she's just a great movie producer.
No, like, is she?
Yeah,
is 789 is great movies.
great, not in every movie she's produced is great films, but most of the movies she's produced are financially dominant, successful.
Yeah, well, all of these were financially successful.
Exactly. So, like, if you're looking at it like as her boss, you're like, like, you can't justify getting rid of Kathleen Kennedy. She's a legendary filmmaker, but like, is she the right person to spearhead creative direction at Star Wars? I can't.
Clearly not. Like, very clearly not.
Yeah.
I don't know what a Saw Gerrera is, but we'll just make a movie on it. Is that a tool?
Technically.
Do you imagine?
Anyways. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Do you imagine like someone from the creative team who's just like highly niche, like I guess just like subject or like an expert on this new canon? Like, there are people that's their job. Pablo Hidalgo and Carrie Hart, I think. Yeah, and just like explaining that to like a corporate stooge. Yeah, being like, no, we need to have this Saw Gerrera movie. And they're just like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, that's why it's tough, right? Like, can you justify this movie about this Clone Wars character? There's like, no one cares about that.
Yeah, like you just like burst into like the boardroom and just like a bunch of old dudes just in suits being like, what the fuck?
Like, I remember when Solo came out, I saw it. Obviously there's like the Darth Maul reveal. So many of my friends texted me, yo, what the fuck? Who is that? Is that Darth Maul? He's alive? Didn't he die in episode 1? And I'm like, well, no, actually, he came back in Clone Wars, and then we're not really sure what happened to him. And then he actually shows up in Rebels and dies in Rebels. So it actually makes sense chronologically that he would be here. And they're like, yo, what are you talking about? Oh, he had spider legs made out of metal. What? He had a brother, and then they both got killed by Sidious. It was weird. I don't know.
Hey, man, I just had
that doesn't sound movies.
I want to spend on a Star War.
Yeah. Anyways, this has been fun.
Yeah.
That has been our conversation on the Force as a magic system. I think we should do more of these specific magic systems and how they play out comparatively to
Harry Potter.
Hard and soft magic systems. Anyways, we are the Lords of Lore. You can find us on this YouTube channel, obviously, but also on any podcast network you may listen to your podcasts on. We release a flagship show here every Tuesday, as well as additional shows on Fridays where you can catch us reviewing books, talking about super nerdy niche things with special guests, and recently playing Dungeons and Dragons for your enjoyment. So Yeah, you can follow us at Lords of Lore Pod on Instagram and at Lords of Lore. No, sorry, at Lords of Lore on Instagram and at Lords of Lore Pod on Twitter. As always, I am Matt.
I'm Luca.
And Will.
And we are the Lords of Lore.